Hey, welcome to Vineyard Podcast. Super excited to be with you guys today. How's your week been, Josh?
Good until these fires, man.
Yeah.
This is wild.
We're kind of in the midst of that, maybe.
Depending on when you are listening to this,
Yeah.
it's either the fires are roaring as the ambulance is going off right now.
It's
or
a
the
very
fire
surreal
truck.
time. It's very tragic for our neighbors and very uncertain, and there's a lot of anxiety in our neighborhoods and city.
I think right now it's 0% containment, but they're sending air support again. They had to stop it last night because of the weather. It was too windy.
And Biden was in town, too. It affected airspace, they said.
Oh, like his arrival negatively
Something,
impacted
yeah.
their ability to distribute
There was
water.
a no-fly zone.
Oh, I thought it was just like, it might have just been crazy wind too.
Yeah, maybe. That sounds like a fire truck, actually.
I think they just requested all.
Yeah, for
available.
everything.
Yeah,
Everything.
Yeah, even if you're like a volunteer.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Very hard, very sad for a lot of people in our community, and it's weird that it comes right after like New Year's Eve, which is stereotypically and kind of sentimentally we're programmed to have so much anticipation, so much hope. Like on New Year's New Year's Eve in Times Square, the guy was like, "You can literally start new tomorrow. It's a brand new day. You can start fresh." And then immediately there's violence in New Orleans, there's violence in Vegas, and now there's destruction in a different way all around us.
Can't control the earth, man.
Nope.
Can't control people, no matter if it's a new year or not.
Nope.
It's sad. Very sad.
When we're in destruction like that, I think it's a good question a lot of us ask, like, how do we trust God that he can make something great from destruction? Is that too abrupt?
Oh my gosh. I was not ready for us to go into
Let's not go
something
there yet.
We can. If
No,
we want to
it's
jump
all right.
in there.
We can
do it.
we can talk about
Easy.
this beautiful plant.
We could. I don't even think that's real.
No, but I was thinking
Oh, that is real. There's a
totally-
plate that for watering. I wonder what this is.
we can go there later.
We can go there now. It's fine.
But your week's been good besides this destruction.
Busy. Kids were in school not in school until Monday. So I resonate with every parent right now that is exhausted.
You just got notified that school's getting out early today too.
Yeah. Yeah, my kids were they have a limited knowledge of, well, actually growing up in Colorado, fires are pretty common, but
First forest fire I ever saw was when I lived in Colorado when I was like 5.
mm-hmm.
I still remember
Yep.
the orange flames on the mountain and just that fear in my little heart.
There is this like wild picture when I was growing up in Denver and then in the Springs and in Denver, where it's like this massive fire that happened when I was in high school, and there's literally like these flames that look like they're coming up over a mountain. So it's like in California it would be like categorically a mountain. In Colorado it would be more like a large foothill. But it was coming up over, and you could see like the city of Manitou Springs and Colorado Springs, and it was like like this ball of fire was like creeping, and that fire ended up ruining, I think it was like 60,000 dwelling units and displacing,
It's horrible.
100,000 people, burned away like places I went to when I was a kid, gone. Like for one of them they rebuilt. It was what was it? It was like I don't know what you would call it. It was just like a place that you like listen to like live bluegrass country music, and you ate like old school barbecue and it was a place that families would always go to. Anyways, I went there.
Theater or something.
Kinda all outside, animals. It was very Colorado, like just that whole like free country, not like Southern or cowboy, not Texas. It's Colorado's got its own distinct like outdoorsy culture. It's like. It's more like you own buffalo, and like you just have 50 million acres of just like untouched, beautiful land that you hunt on. Very Colorado. Yeah. But that place got destroyed, and then like a whole bunch of people donated, and they rebuilt the entire thing, like for like 4 years later, which is pretty crazy. It was like, actually, I was just thinking about Notre Dame when it caught on fire. What was that, 5 years ago? I thought supposedly it was going to take 40 years.
Yeah.
Because they kept on saying they needed to get all the wood from a place. They needed to grow it, but then it just opened.
It's crazy.
Like three
Just
weeks ago,
right before Christmas.
Yeah, I think the
so.
French governor or whatever he is also needed a little bit of a boost in his pollings
little
too.
help.
Yeah. So
Rebuilding.
are we talking about ashes and God and sadness, or what are we talking about?
Talking about rebuilding from the ashes.
Okay.
And kind of reminds me of a new sermon series
Oh, yeah.
that's coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
How God wants us to rebuild.
That's right. Haggai. This Sunday. We were going to do a
Haggai.
series. What'd you say?
Yeah, Haggai.
Yeah, Haggai. Not
Haggai.
not Haggai or
Not
Haggai.
Haggai.
No, Haggai. Yeah, we were going to do a different series. What were we going to do?
We were going to do some of our core values.
That's right. Yeah, which would have been
Like
really
our
good
three
still.
distinctives.
Yeah, which would have been still really good.
Yeah.
But
Perfect for the new year, but I think we both felt a strong pivot.
well, we haven't been in a book.
Yeah.
Like we were in Jonah, and then before that we were in the response series, Jonah, and then we jumped into parables. So that's just
And
like
Revelation.
oh, that's right, and Revelation. So yeah, but Revelation wasn't the whole book.
No, but going through a whole Old Testament book, that's amazing.
It's super fun. Yeah, it's only
gonna be
two
so fun.
It's only 2 chapters. We'll
3
break it up
4
into 4 weeks. Yeah, because there's 4 sections, 3 prophetic words, 4 sections in Haggai that are distinct words from God to the people of Israel through Haggai, the prophet. So that'd be really cool. But yeah, we were just thinking about, do we do a series on our values, which would still be very good to do, or do we want? It's good to have a cadence of like every other being in a book.
Change it up.
Yeah. So, and then we'll be in Genesis after that for 12 weeks in the story of Joseph,
That's
which will be
super
really
exciting.
good. That'll be really fun
Lots
because
of
that's
good Old Testament.
that's like 6 chapters that we'll just literally work through all of them verse by verse. That'll be really fun.
Super
I mean, really, it's
exciting.
just context by context, situation by situation in the text. But Haggai will be great. There's so much history leading up to the book itself. And then when it was written, who wrote it, why it was written is just, I mean, you could preach without even reading more than verse 1 in Haggai 1, which talks about King Darius. You could literally spend 40 minutes just preaching
Yeah.
how they even got to that point.
And you're going to set us up with that. I love
Yeah.
the way you and your sermons you give great context and perspective historically.
Yeah.
It's going to be rich for
Well,
us.
if you don't know the narrative, you're really not, it's not helpful. Like you read it and you go, oh.
Yeah, and that's vital for Haggai. You can't just start with verse 1. You have
Well,
to know what's
Haggai's in
happening.
a group of texts. So there's all these books that were either written at the exact same time from different perspectives. And so you've got like Ezra, Nehemiah, Haggai, Esther, all of those are pre-Second Temple or like right as the Second Temple is being rebuilt. Haggai's the rebuilding of the Second Temple, right? And so in ancient Near Eastern studies, for historians, Second Temple Judaism is a massive historical undertaking because that is the culture that Jesus was born into. So it's really cool that there's a large amount of biblical narratives that basically set the tone for why the Jewish people and the culture that Jesus is born into, how that even came to be.
Wow.
Because if we didn't have those books, we would be a little bit lost as to why Jesus says what he says, why different things are why are the Jews in first century so obsessed? Like they get more furious at Jesus when he makes any declaration about the temple than anything else. And that would have been a big deal, but when you start discovering that the people didn't have a temple and the work that they do to get a temple, the second temple, to rebuild it. Because like when Solomon built the temple, it wasn't built in the context wasn't in disarray. It was actually the last time that the people of Israel were unified. David hands off that. David's not allowed to build it because he's got too much blood on his hands, and God loves him, but he's not pleased with all of his actions, and so he allows Solomon to build it. But if you think about that temple was very symbolic and very significant, but it doesn't have a history of the people being burdened to build it. It was Solomon's call to build it. And this iteration in Haggai, it makes so much more sense why the people become so much the way that they are. And then for 300 years, or more than that, for 500 years, we see the culture the way that it was, and then that Jesus is born into it. So it's really good. It's really good to have context, and it'll be really fun to talk
Haggai
about.
just calling out to the people to rebuild and to stay focused and have priorities.
Yeah, well, it's actually so here's what's funny about Haggai. God's upset.
Yeah, he's upset.
Yeah, because the story goes, I mean, if we're going to go there, the story goes that the people of Israel, they get separated into two different groups. You have the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. That happens after the Davidic reign and after the coup of David's son trying to steal the nation, Absalom, and then after Solomon, then you have the splitting of the nation. And then you have the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, Israel and Judah. And then you have all of this wild stuff happening in other larger books like Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel, which are all indictments on. And then you have Second Kings, First and Second Kings and stuff kind of continues the thread of how stuff goes bad.
Yeah.
So all that's really important, but it gets a little bit lost until you start realizing what's happening macro, like economically and culturally in other cultures. Like at this point in time, after David dies, Solomon dies, and all these terrible kings start showing up, other world powers become really significant, like northern kingdoms, like the Babylonians and the Persians and a bunch of other people. So then what you have happen, though, is really interesting is that different groups, different tribes of Israel start progressively forgetting God. The tribes that are closer to Jerusalem in the southern kingdom kind of pride themselves on their proximity. And so the northern kingdom at first starts falling away. And that's where you get a lot of Ezekiel stuff and Jeremiah, which is they stopped caring about God.
Yep.
They neglected. This is when, and it kind of makes sense a little bit, like they weren't going to the temple often. They were barely participating in festivals and then they had all these other nations around them. So they start getting, this is where you get all the stories of Baal and like their crops were getting ruined. And so what are you going to do? Well, if your God Yahweh isn't doing what you want, then go worship Baal, the god of fertility, which wasn't always just sex. It was also grains and stuff. So they start doing that. And then eventually God says to them, I'm going to destroy you. Like you're in my land that I gave you, and you're not even cultivating it. You're doing nothing. You're not being a blessing to the nation. So they forgot the most basic Abrahamic covenant. So God goes, I'm going to bring a nation into you and destroy you because you're not even my nation anymore. And that's when you get all the stories of Israel as a harlot and God is faithful to her. So then the northern kingdom gets destroyed, taken away to the Assyrian nation. And then you've got this little remnant group of people, and that's the southern kingdom. And eventually they get taken away and they get exiled. And that's when like the story in the scriptures really revs up again. Because then you get the book of Daniel, which like everybody knows like the big stories in Daniel, right? Yeah. Like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego aren't going to bend down to, they're not going to bow. They've got the fourth man in the fire. You've got Daniel getting all these visions. But then you have this really interesting thing. If we ever get a chance to preach Daniel, it's super cool because there are these distinct visions, and then there are these four beasts, if you will, with crowns. And they represent nations, and it's a huge conversation in biblical theology on who those nations are, and depending on your political persuasion, that's very significant.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Either one of those terrible nations that creates the abomination of desolation is either a current nation somehow, which is very dispensational,
enemy to America.
Yeah, exactly. Usually like that. What is that like Left Behind stuff? Or it's more historically appropriate in its context. So that's very important because all of that means Israel gets captured, exiled, and then lo and behold, this amazing thing happens, which is the nation of Babylon is destroyed, which no one ever thought could possibly happen. And the Persians, which is one of the nations represented in Daniel, comes and destroys them along with another group. And they conquer the Persians. Well, when that happened, or they conquer the Babylonians. So what's interesting is the Persian king was very liberal. Liberal meaning he thought innovatively compared to the rest of the culture. He did not believe that people groups that are enslaved to him should be centralized away from their religious centers. He thought that that was pretty unstrategic, which actually is pretty smart. Like, so he releases all these people to go back to their lands. This is in like 586 BC. So the people of Israel for an entire generation, for like 80 years, were without anything. And this is where Jeremiah, you get that text in Jeremiah where it basically says like, when you're in a foreign land or exile, basically make sure it prospers. Like Timothy Keller talks about that all the time. We're exiles in Babylon. Yes. It's our job to make sure Babylon thrives. And so that's where you get like the flourishing language, that like the Redeemer city to city stuff. That's all because of that text. So then, I won't do all this on Sunday, but then, so Darius says, hey, everybody needs to start going back. And when that starts happening, then you start getting the stories of Ezra, Nehemiah. Esther was before that, because Esther was a representative of the Northern Kingdom. She was born into a Gentile situation. So then the people of Israel, the Jews, they're allowed. They're not called Jews at this point, but they're allowed to start coming back. And then you get the story of Ezra, which is the bringing the law back for the first time. So it's bringing the scrolls back, even though they had been stolen and burned and destroyed. He was able to be a part of that. You've got so you've got Ezra, you've got Nehemiah, you've got Esther, you've got Haggai, like all these books. They're all kind of like interject. They actually mention each other in every book too, which is really fascinating. But Nehemiah is about a political leader in Babylon, or might not be the official city of Babylon, but he has this urge to go back and rebuild the walls of the city, because he hears 100 years later than when it happened that his people group lost their city. So he goes and rebuilds the wall, which is a huge book that people love to preach through because it talks about rebuilding and placing watchmen. That's where we get a decent amount of our Christian theology of warfare prayer from that text, because it's like, what do you do when foreign nations oppose you? And then also, what do you do when internally there's opposition? Because he was experiencing, and then so you get like all these decrees that he wrote where he's like hammer in one hand, but then a sword in the other. So it's like build but protect kind of mentality. Cool. So all that stuff. So then we get to Haggai, which is all the people of Israel. They get the law back. They get the walls back. They start rebuilding their home. But in the midst of trying to rebuild the temple, they stop. So they build an altar, because we know in Ezra they worship the Lord, and he reads the law. I actually preached on this in the summer. He he reads the law. Everybody raises their hands and everybody falls on their faces, and they worship day and night for 24 hours a day, or however long it was, as he completes reading the entire law. Well, they did that on the altar, but the altar is just a foundation. There's no Holy of Holies. The ark is gone at that point. It got stolen, and they never retrieved it. People think they have now, but so then you have Haggai, and he shows up. I think it's like 18 years after the foundation of the altar was poured. So an entire babies are now 18 years old with their own kids, married, and all that.
Wow.
The altar of God is abandoned. All of the cedar wood planks and everything that would have been required that they had gathered and they had brought from all the nations, which was a fulfilled prophecy of somewhere in Isaiah. They would have put all of that on the altar, prepared to build it, and for 18 years they not only neglected it, but they actually, the illusion we get in Haggai 1 is that they started taking from it to make their homes better, not to build their homes. They actually, they upgrade their homes, and they put the wood of the Lord's altar as planks on their homes.
So it's kind of about priorities.
Like basically God says, I brought you back. I didn't have to do that. And he quotes them. He says, and you say with your mouth that now is not the time to rebuild for the Lord. Now is not now. And he mocks them. And he's like, I brought you back. I didn't have to bring you back. I made sure that foreign kings had a change of heart. Political ideologies shifted for the first time in ancient Near Eastern history to be pro-outsider. He's like, I literally changed the hearts of kings for you.
Yeah.
And
What are you doing?
what you built your walls,
You beautified your home.
you upgraded your entire home,
Wow.
and you stole from me. Now, here's
That's
what's
kind of where we start.
Here's what's wild. Every other time the people of Israel had done something like that, they've been destroyed,
Yeah.
but they're not.
No.
So it's really
Well, God sends them a person, Haggai.
usually when God sends a prophet to condemn you, it's bad
No,
news.
it's real bad.
But here's what I love. I actually was reading a scholar this last week, and he said this is like the one time we see the ultimate priority of God for his people, which is like he's disgusted at what's happened, but he's most disgusted that his people don't even love him. And he doesn't, if he gets rid of them, it's starting all over again, which he promised he wouldn't do. And so there's this part of him that's like, why don't you guys just love me? Like I've done everything. And now all you have to do is worship me. All I want you to do is worship me. I don't actually care about anything else. And now you won't even do that?
Wow.
So it's got some like messianic plays on it, which is God could easily just burn this whole thing up, but he's so obsessed with people encountering him. He's going to do this again. He's going to let him try.
And when he comes to them, like Haggai goes to them like 3, 4, 5 times
Yep.
with weeks separating. And you just see that relentless heart of God just for his people in the midst of the frustration and the anger.
Yeah.
There's also just a love and a commitment to them. It's really
Yeah, he hasn't forgotten
very
about them,
beautiful.
even though they have not just forgotten about him, but they've stolen from him.
Yeah.
And he goes, hey, it's time, please. Let's really make this a priority. And fascinatingly enough, the people don't really fight against it.
Yeah.
It's a really short book.
Yeah.
And the timeline's obviously longer than that. But yeah, it really reveals God's heart like for his people and how much. And he will spend generations ensuring
Yeah.
hundreds of years. Like that's actually why, like we could even talk about like eventually what's going on here, but like destruction isn't the end for God,
No.
but it doesn't mean that within one generation it's restored. Like
That's right.
these people got to see the fulfillment of something that their great grandparents
Yes.
forgot about.
Yeah.
So it's pretty
That's
cool.
really crazy.
So that'd be really fun. I don't know. I mean, I'm still working on how to get all of that history into 5 to 10 minutes of an intro.
Wow. Well, people have to listen to the podcast.
Yeah. It's so important. If you don't know
huge.
that
No, and
context,
you
then
have
it
a
gets
really-
really confusing.
No, and you have a great gift of bringing that context in history, even super unscripted right now. It's just, it's really cool.
It's fun. Well, if you
very
know that
cool.
stuff narratively and you see the larger arc of scriptures and you see how things kind of connect, then anytime you open your Bible, it just becomes that much more easy, to grasp.
I've been looking a lot at Haggai in the last few weeks, and one of the things that's interesting to me is just how incredibly relevant it still is for us even right now.
Oh, yeah.
Like priorities for the new year, not to take it out of context, but then even rebuilding. How are we ever going to rebuild something as beautiful as what it used to be? And then that applying to the situation we're in now with fires and with everything else. And then there was one verse that was super short that I took a note on, the Haggai 1. It's like 4 words that are just so beautiful. And he says, I am with you.
Isn't that at the very end of one of his promises?
Yeah, at the very end of verse 13 in chapter 1. Even amidst all the devastation, God's presence is just there. He's the
it's verse
anchor.
13.
Yeah.
Well, here's what's crazy. So then Haggai, the Lord's messenger, gave this message of the Lord to the people. I am with you. So the Lord stirred up a spirit of Zerubbabel, which we'll talk about, and the governor, which is huge because now you've got a religious leader. You have a prophet, a priest, and a king, which is also, again, a huge thematic element of Jesus being all of those. And in the spirit of the son of Joshua, the son of Josach, the high priest, spirit of the whole remnant of the people. So here's what I love. I am with you. That phrase, like the phraseology of that, doesn't make sense because there is no temple. So again, messianic claim
Wow. Yep.
happening because, I mean, for those of you guys listening, Jews didn't believe that there was a dispensation of grace where the manifest presence of God was always with his people if there was no temple. That was why the temple is so important. That was why David cried out for it, because he knew the tabernacles weren't enough. And God even relayed that they weren't enough, because everything is Edenic. So it reveals back to like that God's desire has always been to dwell, walk with his people. So the fact that he says, I am with you, I'm living with you, despite the fact that the temple has not yet been built, is very comforting.
It's very comfortable. It's powerful
for them, but it's also, I mean, think about right now,
Right.
the incredible destruction that is happening in our own city. It's like God can look at something that is miserable and horrendous, and people go, "Where are you?" And He can also say, "I am with you,"
Wow.
which is pretty.
It's a powerful promise.
Yeah.
It's something we renew our minds. We have to renew our minds to that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because this season just breeds, where are you? Why aren't you here?
Well, and even in like our own church, because we're in the middle of a renovation project, you know, some people might think that if the church isn't ready, you know, then God may not be as present. I haven't felt God since the, you know, whatever. And it's like, no, that's not true. Actually, the Lord is here, like in the midst of, you know, drywall still being put up. Right. Like, so there's a cool aspect to that too.
I think there's a theme in Haggai too of God building something even more glorious than what was in the past. Because the people I think were frustrated at times because they were seeing that what they were building just wasn't what it used to be. It was different.
Yeah. But it ended up becoming more glorious than
Way
the first.
More glorious.
Yeah.
And that's even kind of a metaphor for this season.
Like
for
Solomon's
us.
porch and all that, way bigger. The second temple was
right. But in the midst of it,
miserable.
You lose that perspective. And I think
well, they didn't even have pictures. They didn't have pictures of what the old temple was. All they had was the law. All they had was the stories,
the narratives,
and then these like, and then you have all of these like. I mean, I don't know how much the people of Israel in that time knew how much the creating of like the ark or the building of different buildings in Genesis were symbolic of what the temple would look like. But there's a very specific reason why the ark, Noah's ark, has all these cubits that are squares and all it's like
details.
It's very it's temple oriented. This is a safe haven. God is delivering people out of judgment. And it's like, no, that's a temple mentality. It's why the ark technically could never float. Like, it was never meant to be thought of that way. It was meant to be like, this is, I know. Like, but, I mean, like, they've done a bunch of physics studies on it. And, like, if built exactly the way the scripture said it, it's not buoyant. So it's like, there's something more going on there, which is this is a deliverance mechanism.
That's a different podcast.
Yeah. Don't want to get in too much trouble. But it's super cool. So, yeah, there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of potential. There's a lot of like, who knows what the people were anticipating or not. We do know that they were probably very discouraged. Yeah. They're in like the middle of construction in their home, and it's like, this just looks like a mess. Yeah. Is this ever going to be beautiful ever again?
Wow, know? That's good.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah. I mean, jumping from Haggai to our building to fires, we're doing a lot here, but coming back from the holiday Sabbath, the Christmas season. Yeah. A lot of exciting but different destruction of some old gross walls downstairs. Yeah. And some different aspects of this building that needed a lot of renovation.
Lots of progress.
Yeah. So you come down and you see it takes some destruction sometimes to make progress, and that's a different subject. But God rebuilds something really beautiful. So.
Yeah. It's been a good couple weeks for the church building to experience its own sense of Selah. It's not paused. It hasn't paused truly because the contractors are here.
They've been working.
Yeah, they've been doing a really good job. But yeah, it's amazing to see the transformation of like the kid space.
I can't wait for people who are listening or watching. I just can't wait for them to see what's been happening in the kids space.
Yeah. The kids space most specifically because on Sunday, the sanctuary isn't going to be mind blowing. We're more or less just like beautifying it and simplifying it and making it wonderful.
It's like we had to
We have to go down before you go
we're
up
going
on
down
that.
and we're kind of there.
That's
and
correct.
We're turning up.
That's
now.
right. Yep.
So it's still going to feel weird, but if we can go back to the back rooms and when we do that update, it's amazing.
Yeah, the
kid space.
The kid space
really
is a
nice.
reminder of where we're going,
Yeah.
right? That's kind of like the little callbacks you see in Haggai to previous promises of God. That's kind of, it's like if you want to be inspired, go to the Mother's Lounge because it's the most done room in the entire building. If you want to be really inspired of what a finished product could eventually become, go to like the new playground room. The playground's not in there yet, but it's a blank slate. So it's like,
beautiful.
new
Looks so
floors,
huge.
huge, exciting.
It's really nice.
Right. And
clean.
then Ron and the team are getting ready for all the other rooms. So it's like you can see how every little step is actually getting us closer and closer to it being absolutely stunning.
Yep.
And again, just what we said in our last podcast, we're not, this isn't a heart transplant.
No.
Like this isn't a bone marrow transplant. This is like it's like we're going on a diet and we got a tan.
Yeah.
We're getting summer beach ready,
Yes.
just losing a little bit of weight to show off some of the new workout we've been
Much
doing.
needed repairs and some updating and renovation.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
really,
great.
very beautiful.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
It's really exciting to see. People are gonna be so encouraged to see what's happening down there.
Yeah.
And then I love even that metaphor of what are we building? Like we're building a mother's lounge. We're building a playroom. We're building a lot. And I just think this time of the year lends itself to that kind of question. Just personally, are we building our families? Are we building our careers? But how are we building God's kingdom? And like we talked about the last podcast, this is just a facility that facilitates so much.
Yes. Yeah.
Super excited for the kingdom things that are coming. We have an encounter night coming
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah. January 26th.
That's, if you haven't been to an encounter night and you're listening or watching, come.
Yeah. I just think that like, I wish that somehow people would find out that in the West Side, there's 1.2 million people on the West Side or something like that. There's a lot of people here. Yep. If people knew that every month there's an hour and and it's very guided and directed. This is not like show up and like flop on the ground like a fish and see what happens with the Lord. Like this is real deal direction. We've done ancient prayer. You know what I'm talking about. Like I don't want to just like smooch on Jesus for an hour. Like I want people
it's for everyone.
It's formational.
I mean, I think sometimes you think worship nights, encounter nights are for a certain group. Like it's a very spiritual group of people or something. No, God wants to encounter every one of us.
Well, also that's like a vineyard thing. Power evangelism is the assumption. I mean, the John Wimber model of ministry that we espouse in every way is the idea that God is not too weird for people. Never. You might think what he's doing is weird and concerns, but that doesn't mean it's weird. I mean, like Caleb, one of our, what do you call him? Like our associate national director for theological thought or whatever. Super smart guy. He talks about how like even what was happening in like the revivals that the vineyard was around, some strange stuff was happening. And some people would call that strange fire, but it's not. Like it's God is doing something that is so other that it's beautiful yet weird. And so our encounter nights, the assumption is not like this is for the super spiritual. It's actually for the most hungry.
That's good.
It's just like, are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Are you really tired and broken and weary and like you don't have anything left? Then unlike a Sunday morning, this is a chance for you to just get completely poured into. Like we're empowering you on Sunday mornings to go be kingdom builders in the world. Sunday evenings, we assume you are undone. You like our kingdom sessions. Like I wish everybody in LA knew that we have for free. Like this is like you can show up, and for 20 minutes there are going to be 3 people that they're not going to like pray over you. Like I pray for this and I pray for that. It's like they're listening. They're seeking the voice of God. They're scribing it. They're making sure that what's being said is truthful. And Godward and scriptural and all
very
these things.
Responsible, very faith-filled,
unbelievably
very
encouraging, very powerful. It's like if you knew that once a month you can sit in a room and for 20 minutes get the most undivided prophetic time of prayer.
No,
Unreal.
and there are people who all around our city, and even people in our church that maybe never have actually just had someone pray for them constantly.
Oh my gosh.
Like I know
Yeah.
I've grown up, and my mom's an intercessor, and she prays for me all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think I can tell when she's not.
Yeah.
Because it just feels off.
Yeah.
There are people in our community or in our city who have never experienced.
I
that kind of
remember the
prayer.
very first time in my life I had people pray over me like that.
Yeah.
I was in college,
Wow.
and our mentors, they weren't our mentors at the time. They flew out to Tabor College in the middle of Kansas, hosted a revival week, and Fred, Esther, and his team, which we still know all of them to this day, and they took like 5 of us key leaders of the college ministries and put us in a room with their key leaders, and every single one of us got the chance to stand in the middle and just get prayed over and prophesied over. And I just obliterated into weeping for 40 minutes.
Yeah, wow.
Like I was undone. I'd never had people pray for me. I'd had people say like, Lord Jesus, we just pray that Josh would be able to, really have strength in his time as his mom and dad are going through a divorce, and really just hope, and it's like, that's okay. But I had people like going like, Josh, the Lord is saying to you,
Yeah, that changes everything.
and they were spot on. This wasn't like happy-go-lucky,
No.
rainbows and roses. This was real,
Yeah.
discernible.
It's like that word minister, like they minister to you. And minister is a verb, not like a minister comes.
Correct.
And it's like a pastor. It's like, no, these people listen and they work and they minister, and the Spirit of God flows through them. And people walk out of the encounter sessions with a different countenance on their face than when they walked in. It's really, really powerful. It's one of the most exciting things that happens.
Well, we just
that
stole
time
it
of
from
Vineyard
National.
Sure.
Like,
or
which
we
was,
stole it from the early. It's
just
power. It's empowered kingdom ministry.
it's a 21st century version of what the Vineyard has always done with intensive prayer things or what, like, and we made it work for our context. We don't have the ability to have every day, all day intercession happen. So we have these strategic and I mean, like when we experienced it at the National,
Oh yeah,
it was incredible, and it was like, whatever they're doing, we need to do it.
Let's learn from them and take that home.
And we did, literally.
Yeah,
you just hi.
No,
what do you guys do?
Tell me everything you guys were doing.
We'd like
we
to
were
do
there.
that.
And yes.
Yeah,
and
we
it's like,
want
of
our
course.
church to be blessed with this exact same experience. We don't want to show up to our church every Sunday and go, guys, what we just got. Like, we're not Moses going up to the hill and getting the tablet. That happened. It's done. That Jesus is it too. Like, we now just go, guys, we think we experienced something quite profound, and we want every one of us to
because
delight
what
in
happened
this.
wasn't in Denver at the national conference, because that's where God was. It was
Right,
through
right.
His people, and the same God is here in our gallery room.
And those same people that are at the national conference doing things like this are local humans, by
They're
the
local
way.
people like
all
us,
the worship leaders at the Vineyard National are local worship pastors. All the people on the prayer team are local, normal folks, just like our folks.
Yes.
They just have an expectancy. They expect something, and God goes, ooh.
It was beautiful. Last month we had 2 people come to Kingdom sessions and have appointments who had never been to our church. They saw
That's sweet.
They saw it on Instagram, and they're
And
like,
they just needed something.
I can't believe I can just come here. I don't have to do anything. No,
Yeah, it's incredible.
Sit down.
That's incredible.
And let these amazing humans listen to God and pray for you.
Imagine how cool would that be if we became a place where it doesn't matter what church you're a participant in, you knew that once a month you could just get fueled.
There's a well here, and you can come and
drink
from it.
But that's also, again, that's like a super Vineyard thing. That's why like almost no one in mainstream Christianity really talks about Vineyard, but everybody talks like they're Vineyard.
Yeah.
You know, it's like weird. Like I was just meeting with a pastor last week, and he was like asking me about these core tenets of Vineyard. Didn't even know that we were a movement. But then like I was like, well, like kingdom stuff, like you do. And he's like, oh yeah, and I was like, that's Vineyard. Like that's. Do you pray for the sick all the time? That's like a big Vineyard thing. Like
Contemporary worship.
Yeah. No, and I said, have you ever heard of the phrase naturally supernatural? He's like, oh yeah, for sure. I was like, that's a Vineyard. That's actually probably from the mouth of John Wimber himself. Like, so if we can just be a place that's like somehow blessing Mosaic people and vintage people
Or our
and
neighbors
Zoe
who are
people.
going through a divorce or
Yeah.
are super sick, and God's doing beautiful things there.
Could be
and
wild.
a huge shout out to our Kingdom session prayer people. These people
Ken, Ewan, Tommy, Ron, Tasha. I mean, like
Cecilia,
all
there's
these,
a bunch, yeah.
all these team people are amazing.
Brenda, and they pray ahead of time. We're in touch like through the month, even before Kingdom Sessions, staying united and staying hungry.
So your
and
prayer
focused.
pulse email that you send out,
Yeah.
I don't think the church knows what that is.
No, it just goes to staff, elders, and our prayer team.
What is it?
It's a weekly email with needs for our community that people agree to share, and we just cover people in our church with prayer, and we pray for everyone in our church, even if their names aren't on there. So it's just a way to mobilize prayer in and among us.
What if someone wanted to be in the prayer pulse? Like they were like, I have a need.
I mean, right now it's talking to one of us on staff.
Yeah.
And we put it there. We could come up with some.
When someone fills out the
more
prayer
clear.
form, that doesn't go to Prayer Pulse? Oh, it does.
Yeah.
Oh, that's on the
Yeah.
bio site.
Yeah.
That's on the Instagram.
Yeah, right there on Instagram.
So if someone fills that out, that goes to you,
Yeah.
and then you get to put that in the Prayer Pulse. Oh, that's cool.
We got 2 today
Oh, yeah. Well,
of people saying, "Hey, my mom's going through this problem physically,
And we need
needs
to pray.
prayer for healing."
Yeah.
And someone else who needs hope because of a job situation.
Mm.
And so immediately we fire it around,
that's cool.
and these people who are on that chain
They're
actually
praying.
pray. They don't just
Yeah, they
think
don't
about
just
it.
press and hold and then
don't
get
say,
the
"Oh,
like
wow,
prayer
okay,
hands.
That's the latest news and among some secrets among people." No,
They're like, we're
They're like,
going
"We're
to
stopping.
pray.
I know these people.
This,
yes.
yeah, these are intercessors. They have
very
the spiritual
exciting.
gifting. Yeah, that's cool.
Oh, it's
Wow.
good to be back in the new year with these kingdom things to be building, and it's
Yeah.
in the midst of a very weird time for our neighbors and our city,
Mm.
and we can hear the wind blowing and the red glow of the sky right now from our skylight. So,
It's heavy stuff.
yep,
Heavy stuff. So
God is with us.
encounter kingdoms. We have a State of the Church coming up.
We have State of the Church.
Second week of February.
Yeah,
That'll be really good. That'll be fun to keep
Sunday
people
right
informed
after
on.
church.
Yep, informed on what's going on.
Food.
We'll have lunch. Yeah,
We'll have good food.
Let me see if we can get some pizza for that.
That would be nice. We had
What's that
tacos
guy's
last time.
What's that guy's pizza place called?
Petronelli.
If you guys don't know Petronelli,
I think it's Petronelli. That doesn't sound right. It's Petra something.
that sounds a lot like
Oh, man.
Ron's last name.
Petronaklis.
Yeah. So if you guys, while Joel
Oh,
pulls this
man.
up, so if you guys don't know, there is
Gotta-
this pizza
gotta have the right
place
name.
at Venice Church on Friday nights only, pop up, cash only. I'd put my name out there and say it's the best pizza in New York, or not in New York. Whoa, that's not
Wow.
true at all. That's a lie.
You'll put your name out there.
No,
You
I'm not
guys
putting my
heard it.
name out there. That's the wrong city. It's the best pizza in Los Angeles.
It is, and there are New York. The first time I went, the parking lot was full of New York license plates because it's all these New Yorkers
yeah, I
saying
mean, like,
this is
a
the best
quarter
pizza
of
in
LA
LA.
is New York.
No, but I finally found like the pizza that from home.
Yeah, you don't sit down.
No.
But I mean, like, am I exaggerating that? I don't think so.
No,
Because
that's what
Prime was
raves are
just
saying,
Prime
yeah.
was just rated as like the New York slice place, and it's hands down better than Prime,
Oh yeah, yeah.
like hands down.
It's amazing.
And they got the cannolis and their
Free
meatballs.
cannolis, but that's a secret. No, they've gone from
Yeah.
like 500 to 1,000 to 2,000 to 5,000 to 10,000 followers on Instagram, like quickly.
Yeah. So Friday nights,
and it is Petra.
think-
Petra Male.
Petramale. Wow, you were kind
Petramale.
of off. So it's from like
Petronelli.
I think it's like from 4:30 to 7:30. Fridays, Venice Church. If you guys want, let us know. We'll meet you there because Brian and I love their pizza.
It's so good.
So yeah, so State of the Church is going to be the second week of
Petramale
February.
pizza.
Yeah, hopefully we can get that. We'll talk to him. Steve.
Steve.
Steve's
guy.
the owner. He's an
Loves
awesome
Jesus.
dude. Yep. So that'll be cool because State of the Church, we're going to talk about everything that's happened in the last 5 months and then what to look forward to into
that,
Easter.
I love that we do those. That there's people in our church can expect at least a few times a year to have transparency, to have
Yep.
a lot of communication. You know, everyone needs to know these things, and there's nothing.
Well, we're going to
not
ordain some
communicate.
pastors at our State of the Church
Very
because we
exciting.
need to do that legally for Vineyard USA. That's become a very important thing, is to have people ordained nationally, not just locally. So that's an important part. But also being able to be transparent with our finances. We're going to be able to share people our budget, things to look forward to, the home campaign.
A home campaign.
All kinds of cool stuff. So that'll be really great. And then we'll just keep people in the loop on what's happening in the future, ministries, summer plans.
Even before that, we have We have some exciting Lent and Easter and Good Friday and
Ash Wednesday.
Ash Wednesday service.
Yeah.
Yeah?
And we might even do a Maundy Thursday service.
Wow.
Food and foot washing.
I don't think we've ever done Monday, Thursday, or Ash Wednesday.
It's very Anglican of us.
Very rich.
That'd be super fun
Very
and
powerful
Orthodox.
times.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
Very powerful.
So are we going to talk about these fires? Our people, if they're listening right now, how do they process this communal grief that our city is right now still? I don't even think the fire is 1% contained.
Not yet. And they say that it's growing by 5 football fields every minute that's what my mom just texted me, who is in New Mexico watching national news.
I wouldn't be surprised. That's
I mean, there are embers everywhere. It's
yeah,
the wind's
zero
blowing like
containment. I mean, that's not as many acres as you like when you think about how big the Palisades are. Football fields aren't that big in comparison to the land mass, so it just shows like, and there's a lot of like shrubbery and trees because it goes all the way up to the what are those mountains called?
Yeah, the Santa Monica Mountains.
Yeah.
No, I mean, for people who have lived in LA for a handful of years or more, there's connection or relationship to people that are being evacuated right now.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Well, if you work near Century City, that's a huge hub for a lot of people to work.
Mm-hmm. And we know
if you're at Google,
2 or 3 right now in our community that have been evacuated here in the vineyard.
Yeah.
So
long-standing, lived there their whole lives.
Their whole world. That's their
everything.
That's their home place.
Yeah. So there's a lot of sadness and grief and
anxiety on our streets right now.
Oh yeah.
People stressed. Yeah. Principals canceling school and
yeah. So what do people do with that? Like, national tragedies are strange because corporate tragedies are strange because if they're people induced, sometimes we almost have an answer for that. Like, people can be bad. Like what happened in New Orleans, horrific, so sad.
People can be.
We also have like a decent grasp of just like people are awful, and we really need to hope and pray that all people become not awful people, which is the hope of Jesus. But it becomes a little bit more challenging when it's a disaster that's natural, like when it's just sad for the pure sake of like there is no logical, there's no human to blame. When how many people are evacuated right now, or how many homes have thousands.
30,000 people evacuated just in Pacific Palisades.
Yeah, so there's like a couple now.
There might be. I mean, maybe I think they're investigating how it started. There might be the evil, but there were so many things that line up that make it so much more complicated. Like last night on the weather, the lady's like, "This is the weirdest season of low humidity."
Yeah.
Added with the craziest winds, added with the drought.
Yeah.
And now there are water problems.
The domino effect is, even if it was started maliciously.
Yeah.
It's horrific. So we've got a couple in our church, younger couple, that one of the gals just came to know the Lord recently, and so like I'm not going to share who they are, but with them in mind, how would you dialogue with them about this? Like, what would you say?
That's a great question for you.
What would you say?
No, what would I say? I mean, the whole theology of suffering is very, very rich to understand that God is with us. I think, like we said, even from that, the 13th verse of Haggai, that I am with you. And there's first the promises we cling to even before we ask the whys. They're promises of knowing that we know certain thing. We know that that He's with us and that He binds up broken hearts. He is close to the brokenhearted. So I would try to hopefully just reassure people of those very real and promises and the faithfulness of God, and then how to explain destruction and evil is difficult. Sometimes we don't have answers.
I had a professor once that told me that to describe or to answer that question, to try to quantify evil, destruction, is like he called it's just a fool's game because he was a professor of systematic theology, so he like thought massive on things like this, and he would always go around the question by saying like, what is evil organized is like his first question. And you're like, oh, of course it is, right? And he's like, no, think about it. Is evil actually organized, inherent within its kind of like structure? Yeah. Evil is actually, there might be hierarchy for a moment, but it eats itself. So it's not structured. Like cancer is kind of structured, but kind of not. It just eats. It just destroys. And so he goes down this road of saying that if there's an answer, if something is answerable, then that means it has some sort of logical order or sequence to it. And yet because disaster is correlated with evil, then actually it's almost like saying, where is north when you're on the North Pole? It's almost like you can't really... Which is, it feels like a cop-out, but it's actually not. Like, I don't actually think that the Christian answer to what's happening in the fires is anything other than, this is incredibly horrific. Yeah. And the pain you feel is nothing compared to the pain that Jesus feels. He weeps, he's angry, he's hurt, this stuff infuriates him. We see that in the scriptures. Anytime something bad happens, even naturally, he hates it. We have no idea why Lazarus dies. But he weeps. We have no idea. Could have been cancer. Could have been he drowned. Could have been pneumonia. Could have been he was just, that just happens, right? But all we know is that he weeps. And so I think, I don't really have good answers for I think there's a lot of really good reasons to suggest why certain things happen, but I think the thing that we know for a fact is where God's heart is in it. And so I just always found my professor's ideology on that to be really helpful. Is he's like, it's not organized. The evil is chaotic. Evil will destroy itself. Evil, at the end of the day, there is not much rhyme or reason other than just destruction. Like there was this like super famous quote in one of the Batman movies. Alfred was like, they were talking about the Joker. Do you remember this? Yeah. So it's like Batman's character. What's his name?
Bale.
Yeah, Christian Bale. Christian Bale's character asks Alfred like something about Joker, and more or less, I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's like, there's really nothing worse than a man who has nothing to lose. Like, Joker literally is so evil because even if he kills himself, he's great.
Doesn't care. Yeah.
Doesn't matter. It's the worst. And it's like, if you can somehow give fires a name, that name would be the Joker. It would be a self-inflicting destroying of all things, spiritual being of some sort, that there is no rhyme or reason to any of it, and Jesus's ultimate triumph on the cross is just is a foreshadow of how he will ultimately triumph over the evils of our actual earth and make all things new. And in the gap, going up to the North Pole, asking where's north,
that's good.
It's like, no, the answer is Jesus is very hurt and angry. Yes. And he is really, really excited to make this world right.
Yes, to make all things new.
He's really excited for that. Like, Jesus is more excited for that than any of us are, because his plan is finally complete. And I think, if anything, it's almost that burden, like the Rick Warren and Alpha and all of them, like, have that, like, it's like the 2040 project or whatever, where they talk about, like, one day we're just going to reach all the nations. Yeah. I think that this can create a sense of urgency of like, Lord, we don't want the earth to be on fire anymore. Yeah. And it's like, well, then how does the kingdom fully arrive? It's when we just reach all the nations. Like, that is the one definitive answer we have in the scriptures for when all things are new. The time of the gospel is kind of like comes to an end. Like, every person, every nation has its moment, and it's done. That's and good. The time of the Jews is completed. The time of Gentile, everything is completed. So we
help build the kingdom.
Literally,
we build the kingdom, and we don't get super concerned with simply building our own jump back to Haggai, our own houses.
Yeah, we
But
run in.
We run in the direction of our
Yep.
priority being,
Yeah.
we're going to build a kingdom. We're going to be instruments of hope to our neighbors right now.
Yep.
Of perspective, helping them understand this, that Jesus suffers with us and he loves our neighbors more than we do. And
When we enter in the way that early Christians did, I mean, like Jesus says, there's going to be famines and wars and earthquakes and rumors of wars. And Rodney Stark, in his book, The Rise of Christianity, he's a socialist or not socialist. He's a sociologist. He might be a socialist, honestly. He passed away recently, but he talks about how the reason why Christianity bloomed into what it did early on was that the one group of people that persistently went into compromising situations full of faith and believing that it's worth it to bring hope and healing were Christians. Yeah. So like when there was a plague going through, Christians went and ministered to people. Yeah. Christians were healthy. They tended to clean themselves. They tended to think of others. And so what happens when the only person who's willing to touch you is a follower of this man named Jesus the Messiah, and for some reason they're not getting as sick as you, there's a supernatural protective component to that. And I think like when it comes to these fires, like I'm very proud of Gare and Vintage Church, because they have one of the largest kind of open spaces in North LA to be like, hey, we can house, and hopefully other churches that are closer. We're unfortunate.
Jimmy, who's from our church, just did that with the Valley Vineyard because there's a fire near him.
Yep, and I think that if more and more of the Christians in the areas that are really being impacted can literally run into the fire in their own way. Going back to Daniel, it's very Jesus.
Yes, this is a call for us to be activated in a fresh way through prayer, through hospitality, through encouragement. We have, I think of a couple in our church they have 2 young children, and I'm struck every week by how different people are in their homes: refugees, Ukrainians, Russians, the outcast. Really
just got a text from someone in our church. I guess there's like a master list of people who, if they are needing assistance during this time, there's a community support list. So, I mean, if someone's listening, this is super cool.
That's really cool.
Maybe if you're in need, let us know, because we've got resources that we can provide to people who need housing. And it looks like food and a couple other awesome opportunities. We just got this text. Wow. So some really cool stuff. But sweet. So we got Haggai. We got building. We got this Sunday coming. It's exciting. Anything else?
No. I mean, one thing that's always good to put before people is 8:00 on Sundays. We have a group of around 20 people, just people listening who come to pray.
Yeah.
And we start off our mornings a little earlier just to center ourselves and meet with Jesus before the day even starts. And everyone's invited to that.
Yes, please come. 8 a.m., usually in the courtyard. If it's a little too windy or cold, then we'll go into the gallery.
Smoky.
Or smoke. Well, I think hopefully it's dissipated by the Lord.
Okay by
Lord,
then,
hopefully.
please.
So, sweet. That'll be great. 8 a.m. Then we'll see everybody else at 9 or 11. And thanks for joining us. If you have ideas for our podcast or actually names, we don't know what to call this. Oh, Jacob called this like Josh plus one. Okay. I felt like that's like a date. And if that's the case, then we need to dress up every time and have like a nice meal and have like, there's this amazing podcast called Dish. Have you seen it? It's in like these Michelin starred lady makes food with another host. Ooh. And they have famous people like Tom Holland come and they eat a meal.
As they talk?
As they talk. Ooh. She cooks it.
Okay.
And then they eat and then they talk.
Ooh.
And I watched an episode. It was incredible.
That sounds incredible.
Just eating food and talking.
Wow.
Yeah.
That could be amazing.
Maybe we could do that. But let us know if you have a cool idea of what we should call this version of the podcast, not the 4-person on the couch podcast.
Yes.
So thanks
for listening.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys soon.